welcome to episode 32 of the Anthrozoology podcast, which is part 2 of our canine anthropology and considering anthrozoology broadcast. I'm Michelle Sidlowski, an anthrozoologist focused on pachyderm-human relations and how humans use language to control the narrative of other-than-human lives.
Hi, my name's Sarah, and I'm looking at shark-human relationships. I'm also very interested and did, as part of my master's in anthrozoology, abandoned cats in Saudi Arabia.
Hi, I'm Chris, and my research focuses on cat-human relations and discourses surrounding roaming cats.
And today we are thrilled to welcome Marco Adda to the podcast. Marco is a true Renaissance person, the founder and director of AEDC, which is Anthrozoology Education Dogs Canines, and INS, which is Integral Neurosoma. Marco is an actor, a scholar in canine-human relationships, an educator, trainer, speaker, coach, and the host of the In the Mouth of the Wolf podcast. Welcome, Marco.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here.
Maybe in a minute you can explain to our listeners what you mean by the Symbiocene, but I'd not heard that term before. And I was, yes, we need the Symbiocene now. Let's get there. Let's reach it. But before I read that, I was kind of lulled into a feeling of learned helplessness kind of thing, thinking, oh, well, I'm not going to think about that because there's nothing I can do. There's no point in stressing over that. There's no point in putting more effort into that. There's nothing I can do. But now I feel like there's some kind of, as I say, simultaneously, there's more hope and now more stress because I'm thinking, right, I'm reinvigorated. How do we get to the Symbiocene? So maybe you could explain to our listeners, what the Symbiocene is and how you think we may get there over and above what you've already mentioned, if possible, especially for the dogs, I guess, the free-ranging dogs.
Well, so the Symbiocene, for scene, we mean a need like Anthropocene, Holocene, and so on, right? So Symbiocene is an epoch where we start to cooperate for the mutual benefit, for the mutual good with other species, right? Instead than human exploiting other species, in the Symbiocene, ideally, we start to cooperate with other species for the good, for their good, and them for our good, right? So it's let's say it's a further step after the Anthropocene, where we are we have clearly dominated the world and with industrialization, because there are debates of where the Anthropocene started, but let's say with the Anthropocene, human, scene, the epoch of human dominating world at the expenses of other species, right? So with the Symbiocene is the further step. Humans realize that they should do things not just for their own interest as a species, but they should support other species also because the result of doing things just for our own species is just the destruction of the world, right? See global warming, see the climate change, and so forth, right? You name it, right? So in this ideal Symbiocene, we start to think through other species and for their own benefit, right? So we work symbiotically together for the good of all species, right? So this term, I guess, was introduced by Glenn Albrecht. He's a scholar, now probably Australian anthropologist, I guess, sociologist, and anthrozoology somehow. The way I see anthrozoology, being aware of human suffering for animal suffering, is part of this level of awareness, of consciousness, this level of understanding that we may have about our own species among other species, and may be part of foundations or any way of those elements that we need to start to work cooperatively with our species somehow, or for the wellness and well-being of other species, and vice versa. So I believe that at the same time, anthrozoology is resulting from us approaching this Symbiocene, right? The fact that we can discuss today about anthrozoology, that somebody is listening this conversation and probably resonating with that term, with what we are discussing, is probably because we have already entered the Symbiocene, that period of human evolution where humans realize that is no longer at the center of the universe, is no longer at the center of this planet Earth, while in fact we are devastating this planet, at least to some extent, and actually needs to think to itself as a species among other species, and empathically embodying animality somehow, you want to put it that way, and start to see other species otherwise differently and work for the well-being of other species, which in return it will be also for the well-being of our own species, right? So I believe there are some interconnections there, some points where Symbiocene and anthrozoology intertwine, let's say, and it's a long way to go. We are in a time of paradigm shifts, and we do our best again to facilitate things. The fact that we are discussing those aspects is part of our effort. Hopefully, this is going to bring some valuable inputs to others, which may be younger than us, will continue this work later.
Thank you.
But we have a lot of work to do. We are still young enough, and we have a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. I was interested in what you wrote about the experiment of speculative biology, wondering, and quoting you, wondering, for example, how dogs would redistribute if humans went missing. And you write that Pearson Beckoff wrote about that in their book. And you said that, I believe it's Pearson Beckoff, foresee that the dogs would entirely adapt to a world without humans and within 3 canine generations in less than 50 years. And it made me think of Chernobyl, or we can put a link to an article in the references, where they talk about, and again I'm quoting, more than 30 years after one of the facility's reactors exploded, researchers have found that the land surrounding the plant, which has been largely off limits to humans for 3 decades, has become a haven for wildlife, with various animals roaming through thick forests. And it's now it now represents the 3rd largest nature reserve on mainland Europe. And in your paper, you talk about COVID and Bali and the effect of COVID on Bali. And of course, it's a long paper and there are different things going on in there. But that little anthropause, that little COVID pause, the COVID scene, as you write, it's just a really nice, possibly a nice example of a Symbiocene moment where there are no pressures from the outside. People and the dogs are allowed to live together in happiness and without the pressures that come from various places. And just before I ask you to comment on that, I can see that tourism is pressuring Saudi Arabia right now. That exactly what, as you describe, dogs and cats are being put under pressure in various ways because, as you write in your paper, they are not deemed to be part of civilization. And it's a very sad moment. And of course, lots of us have different hopes of how we can avoid the annihilation that a lot of the Bali dogs underwent. But yeah, maybe you can speak a little bit about the COVID scene and what happened with the Bali dogs and tourism. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, when you say, for example, maybe the pandemic was a possible example of the Symbiocene, you nail it, because it's probably one possibility toward the Symbiocene is that human understand that we as human, we need to slow down a little bit, right? As we have seen, as we have been forced to do during the pandemic, right? We have been forced to slow down. We cannot go around, we cannot move, we cannot travel, no planes, no cars, and everything became slower, and all the animals came out of the bush, out of the forest, right? So somehow also geographically and land responded. The vegetation increased, right, and the animals came out, right. So and we were slowing our pace. Of course, within that slowing our pace, there was a lot of suffering too, because we were secluded. We were forced to stay indoor. We were confused with all what was going on and all of other sort of struggles that we experienced, right. But probably within that experience, there is an interesting seed, let's say, that may be part of the Symbiocene, of that epoch where we probably cooperate with other animals, we do things in the interest of other animals, and probably is also because we have been slowing down, slowing our pace, which is the let's put it, is the other part of a certain coin. What's on the other side of the coin? On the other coin, it's ourselves reflecting upon ourselves as a species and understanding that that we need to support other animals in the environment in order to thrive instead than exploit it, right? So those two aspects are part same coin. That's what I was trying to say, right? Slowing down and having that degree of awareness, right? And so in Bali also, that during the pandemic, of course, dogs and other animals came out of the bush and were going around everywhere, and people were living in their houses. And the point I make in the paper is that because in Bali there was already there was a rabies outbreak starting in 2008. People had in their memory, many people had dogs, the idea of dogs associated with danger because of the rabies outbreak, right? So at a certain point, during the pandemic, there were a couple of months, 2-3 months, where we were figuring out what's going on, where this pandemic is coming out of. Maybe it's coming from animals, maybe from a bat, maybe from a dog. And then there was a panic all of a sudden, right? That maybe dogs were a reservoir of this seeding, right? And then also that went wrong somewhere, including Bali. Where people with that memory of dogs being dangerous already coming from the rabies outbreak started to believe that dogs may have been the reservoir and carriers, that's the word, carriers of that virus, right? I get I got lost. I think I got lost. What was the question there?
No, I was just asking if you could explain a bit about tourism, Bali.
Oh, yeah.
The dogs before, how tourism affected them. Then COVID came, gave them a bit of a break. Then kind of COVID started again. But then you said that guy, the new, I don't know what the Indonesian term is, but the new pack came in, and he put the anti-animal minister in charge.
Yeah. So there was a change of. A political change in Bali, right? So Bali has a government itself, right? Has its own government, right? So despite it's within Indonesia, but they have a governor, let's say, like a U.S. state, probably, right? Similar to that. I mean, with all of different differences, but just to give you an idea, right? It has a governor that makes its own rules at his home, right? So for a few years, for a decade, dogs were basically persecuted because of the rabies outbreak, right? And coincidentally, this rabies outbreak is parallel to the exponential increase of tourism in Bali, starting from 2008 to 2018. The exponential increase of construction and buildings in Bali, right? Exponential increase of financial resources coming to Bali, exponential increases of many businesses that got developed into in Bali. So it may be, let's say, there is the hypothesis, at least, that dogs were targeted not just because of the rabies outbreak, but because, as in many other cultures, as in many other moments of history, they were an agent of disturbance of many things that were going on in the island. It's also because not all tourists were and are prepared to meet free-ranging dogs when they go abroad, when they leave Italy, UK, Portugal, US, Canada, Australia, wherever, and they go abroad and see a place where free-ranging dogs are so abundant. Not all tourists are prepared they don't know how to behave, know how to interact with those dogs, to cope with some issues that may come around, right? So maybe in some cases somebody may think, okay, less dogs around, less issues, more finances coming in, you know. So it was a very controversial decade from 2008 to 2018. I was there, so I've lived all of those the nuances of those struggles. I witnessed many things, but you know, this is not new. You know, this is part of human-animal conflict, I would say, not human-animal interaction, right? We've done that in many other ways, in many places, as a species, in many places. We keep doing it in many places around the world. We have done that in many moments of histories, trying to control a certain animal population for our own interest. Again, is the Anthropocene, human controlling the world, controlling other animals for the interest of human, right? And one case at the top of the list is certainly that of human-wolf conflict, right? We have been exploiting wolves in every demographic, in every latitude because of the competition we have with them. Although that competition may have been labeled as, okay, those are dangerous animals, they kill our cattle. So, but at the bottom of it, at the root of it, there is a competing interest with those animals, and you know, and of course, every epoch. I don't want to generalize, just to frame the situation, but every epoch, every animal, every type of conflict, every social, historical moment needs to be, if you can say, screenshot specifically to understand what was going on or what's going on within that specific situation, right? But again, let's say bottom line, that in Bali is another case that reflects our identity crisis, if you want to put it that way. We are a species in a tremendous crisis of identity. We don't clearly know why on earth we are on earth, first and foremost, how we got here, what we need to do, how we need to behave within our own, specifically within our own species and communities and societies, how to behave with other species, how to save this, how to take care of this planet. And while we are still understanding all of those things, artificial intelligence comes out, right? To make our crisis even worse, you know, who we are then. Should we interact with animals? Oh my God, now these are the species with artificial intelligence, you know? And paradoxically, I believe that may even help us understand better, you know, when you have somebody that, you know, you see this also in sociology, right? Italian American that goes to the US in the 20th century, they migrate, right? And then other ethnic groups come around. Then you recognize better your ethnic group. You understand better your cultural and ethnic identity when you have other ethnic groups around. That doesn't mean that you need to get in conflict with other ethnic groups, right? It means that you recognize differences and you integrate differences, right? So again, I hope the best for our species, but it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time.
Thank you. It's really interesting. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you.
So yeah, this is probably a little bit of a kooky question, but it's something that I've been thinking about for a while, and sort of a bunch of converging thoughts, and it's related to your professional career as an actor. And I did a beginner's acting course last year, and my teacher he was Italian too, and it was so much fun. So this kind of got me thinking. It really got me thinking about our relationship with other animals, how this can be a tool. And I've always sort of, there's like YouTube channels where people pretend to be dogs and cats, and they're kind of funny. Some of them are actually quite relatable, and you're like, yeah, that's my cat. They really kind of embody the species. And so they're kind of fun. And then I've been thinking sort of more recently about speculative fiction and trying to sort of understand what the cats in my research subjects might really be thinking and feeling. So that's sort of how to really get at that. That's been whirling around all my crazy thoughts that sort of are kind of converging a little bit now. And then this idea of sensory ethnography and sort of trying to feel, smell, touch what the other is feeling. And I know it's sort of been done a little bit with like performative art, I think is the correct term. But actually, I wonder what I'm trying to ask you is what your thoughts are on pretending to be a cat or a dog or another animal and sort of trying to be them as either a research tool, maybe sort of living for a day on the street as a dog, or running with a pack of dogs, or as sort of an educational tool to help people just really think, yeah, what's my cat seeing when she's down on the floor? And that I don't know if you think that's really kooky or what or if you really understand what I'm kind of getting at, but kind of combining that idea of sort of acting as in you get into a character, right? But can you get into the character of an other than human animal? And yeah, that's my question. and would it be useful?
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is core, actually. It's a core question. It's very relevant. It's very important because it goes back to what we mentioned before. That is embodying animality. We make our body as a possible way for a certain degree of animals, certain degree of animality to being expressed, to resonate within our body. And we need that. That's vital for us, either for biological memory, because we carry the biological memory of animals, either for archetypal or archetypical memory, because the archetypes of animals are alive within our psychology, personal, individual, and collective psychology, as it's been described by Carl Gustav Jung, and others after him. So, for example, in martial arts, many people love to study the movement of animals, because that's a need that we have to keep awake that type of animality within our body. It actually helps to avoid conflict. It helps to get rid of some emotional layers piled within ourselves, right? By expressing a certain degree of animality, by studying animal movements, for example. You find that in martial arts, you find that in acting work, because like people like Strasberg or Stanislavski or others, have integrated the work of animals in actor training, right? You find that in dance, in contemporary dance, you find that in traditional dance, the movement of animals, you find that in tribes, their traditional dance that use animal mimicry, which are conducive to communicate values, to initiate youngs, to open and close, for example, rite of passage when young need to grow, or maybe there is a marriage in various moments, crucial moments of certain societies, and you find animal mimicry, right? So as humans, we need to integrate a certain degree of animality within our body, right? And we need to express that. We need to dig into our body and find those lost traces of animality that are piling inside ourselves and are not get expressed, right? For example, in anthrozoology, you have people like we have mentioned in the paper, are the kids, so those teenagers, not just teenagers, also adult people that love to dress as animals, right? Like foxes and cats, so or any other dogs or other animals, right? There are some major animals that are more common, but there are other animals too, right? So many people want to express that degree of animality within themselves, right? And while we have been taming all the animals in real life and we have excluded others, separating ourselves as civilized animal, as civilized, not even animal, we don't even call ourselves as animal, we call us humans, different from other animals, right? And excluded other animals as wild away from us. While we have been doing that externally, we have been doing that also internally. We have separated our animality within ourselves from ourselves, and so we got sick as a species, as a species which the identity crisis I was talking before. It includes also this point, because we are no longer connected, at least generally speaking, with our own animality, right? So going back to your question, should we integrate, or how can we do that? There are many ways to do it, but it's certainly something that we need to do, because it will help. It could help us to understand better who we are. It could help us to become more empathic with other species. It could help us to resolve conflict. It could help us in many ways, right? And it can be integrated into educational programs in schools, not just in actor training work. It could be integrated for social workers. It could be integrated in Actually, I integrated that. I was doing team building. I mean, integrated that obviously in acting work and in yoga teaching and other somatic situations, but I integrated that in team building. When I went into an enterprise, a famous financial institution, and so the managers of those institutions, they want to do some team building, right? And we made some exercises where they express their own animality. They test an animal on themselves. They try their body and see what type of animals they can express, right? At the beginning, it may be a fun game, it may be just chaotic, but then with some adjustments and some cues that you can provide, they start to feel deeply this connection, this animal connection with it, right? And that's part of what we need to recover within ourselves, to have a better understanding, a better feeling on who we are. Who we are is also, we are also animals in that sense, right? We carry many forms of animality within ourselves. So absolutely, I agree with that, and I advocate for that to be spread in many possible ways.
Good, because I really want to do something like that.
Let's organize a workshop. As part of anthrozoology studies, that's working on somatically working, like practically working on animality, integrating some tools. There are many tools that can be used to that, and that may be interesting for the coming generations, for example. Right?
And it just occurred to me, it's probably more social too, that it gets suppressed, because children, they don't think twice about pretending to be a dog. And I mean, I remember galloping around the garden being a horse, and totally in character, totally. I felt like I was a horse. And it wasn't until I became aware that when you get to like 11, that's a little bit old to be 11, 12. So I'd start to just do it in the garden when nobody was looking. And eventually now I don't think I could do it now. I don't think I could get back in that space where I actually felt like a horse. And yeah, I guess you kind of lose that because it's socially... but it's something that I would love to learn to do now, to see if I could sort of become a cat or be more like a cat. And but then I'm just afraid of people laughing at me. So I
think there's academic support for that. I mean, with the whole, sense of perception and embodied knowledge, and moving into, I think it was Grun that talks about embodied empathy. That's the only way really we get to understand other than human animal participants, is by sharing those somatic experiences, right? So I think there's some grounding in the literature that would support it as well.
Absolutely.
I think a workshop on it sounds really good. I mean, I don't know if that could be done online because we're all in different countries or whatever, but if we could organize that sometime in the future on something like that.
We're doing live. We can make this live. Is a place, a university or somewhere, take a space, gathering some students or people interested into that. And I believe it's going to be a wonderful project.
Thank you for joining us today for the Anthrozoology podcast. References mentioned here are listed in the show notes, and we look forward to talking again soon.